The principal thought it would be funny. He told a quiet black student to play the violin in front of the whole class, expecting everyone to laugh. But when the boy lifted his bow, what happened next left the entire school frozen in shock. The day had started like any other at Jefferson High. The classroom smelled faintly of chalk dust and floor polish, and the September sun glared harshly through the windows. Students slouched in their desks, half listening to the teacher's voice. At the back of the room sat Marcus Johnson, his violin case leaning quietly against his chair. Marcus was used to being invisible. He wasn't the loud kid, not the class clown, not the star athlete who drew all the cheers at Friday night games. He was just Marcus, the boy who spoke only when asked, the one who always seemed lost in his own thoughts. Most of the time, people forgot he was even there, but Principal Roberts had not forgotten him. Roberts was a man who enjoyed control, and sometimes that meant turning someone into the butt of a joke. He spotted Marcus, glanced at the violin case, and smirked. "Well," Roberts said, his voice sharp enough to cut through the chatter, "since you're sitting there doing nothing, why don't you give us a little performance? Show us what you've got." The class erupted in laughter. Some students slapped their desks, others whispered, "This is going to be hilarious." To them, the idea of Marcus playing in front of everyone felt absurd. Marcus's heart sank. He hadn't asked for this. The violin was his private world, his safe space away from the noise and judgment of school. But now, under dozens of staring eyes, he felt trapped. Roberts folded his arms and tilted his head, clearly enjoying the tension. "Come on, don't be shy, let's hear it." Marcus swallowed hard. His palms were sweaty, his chest heavy. Part of him wanted to refuse, to stay silent, to let the laughter swallow him whole. But another part, deep, quiet, stubborn, refused to let them win. Slowly, Marcus pushed back his chair. The screech of metal legs against the tile floor silenced. A few chuckles. He bent down, picked up the violin case, and carried it to the front of the room. Every step felt like walking through fire. The laughter simmered but didn't disappear. Whispers darted back and forth like sparks. "He's really gonna do it. This is gonna be awful." Roberts leaned against the chalkboard, his grin wide. He expected a disaster, and the thought of it thrilled him. Marcus opened the case. His hands trembled as he lifted the violin and bow. He could feel dozens of eyes piercing through him, waiting to devour his mistakes. He placed the instrument on his shoulder, closed his eyes, took one long breath, and then he played. The first notes were fragile, shaky, as if they too were afraid of the judgment hanging in the room. But Marcus pressed on, and something shifted. The sound deepened, steadied. A melody emerged, soft at first, then swelling with a quiet strength that seemed to pour straight from his soul. The classroom fell silent. The whispers stopped. The snickers died. Even Roberts, arms still crossed, froze in place. The music filled every corner of the room. It wasn't the kind of sound you could laugh at. It wasn't noise. It was beauty, sadness, power. It was years of being ignored, of being underestimated, transformed into something no one could deny. Some students shifted uncomfortably in their seats, shame prickling at their skin. They had expected a joke, a failure. Instead, they were witnessing something extraordinary. Kayla, the girl sitting 2 rows back, felt her throat tighten. She had never really noticed Marcus before. Now, her eyes were locked on him, wide and unblinking. Every note seemed to tell a story of struggle, of loneliness, of resilience. The bow danced across the strings, and the sound rose higher, wrapping around the listeners like a spell. When the final note hung in the air, the room was still. You could hear the faint ticking of the classroom clock. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Kayla whispered, barely audible, "That was amazing." Her words broke the silence. A few students clapped hesitantly, then more joined, and more, until the room that once mocked Marcus was now applauding him. Roberts's face had drained of color. His smirk was gone. He shifted uncomfortably, pretending to look at his watch, but the damage was done. The performance he thought would humiliate Marcus had done the opposite. Marcus lowered his violin. His chest still pounded, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was something else. strength. For the first time in his life, he wasn't invisible. They all saw him now, but Marcus didn't know yet this was only the beginning. Because what had just happened in that small classroom would echo through the entire school. And eventually, far beyond, the applause still echoed in Marcus's ears as he lowered the violin. For a moment, he felt weightless, as though all the years of silence had lifted. But the sound of clapping didn't erase the memory of laughter. That had come before. He knew respect wasn't won in a single song. It had only just begun. Principal Roberts cleared his throat loudly, forcing the clapping to stop. His face was tight, his usual smirk replaced by an awkward stiffness. "Well," he said, his voice brittle, "that was unexpected." Class dismissed. He turned quickly, almost fleeing from the room, leaving the students stunned in their seats. Kayla stood as Marcus packed his violin. She walked up slowly, her voice soft but clear. "You're incredible," she said. "I didn't know you could play like that." Marcus gave a small, polite smile. Compliments were foreign to him, especially from someone like Kayla. She was popular, confident, the kind of student who usually had no reason to notice him. "Thanks," he said simply before slipping the violin back into its case. But others had noticed too. Whispers spread down the hallways as the class emptied. By the time Marcus walked to his locker, groups of students were already buzzing. "Did you hear Marcus play? I didn't even know he had a violin. He's insanely good." For Marcus it felt surreal. The same halls where he had walked invisible for years now pulsed with a new energy centered around him, but not everyone was pleased. Zeke Turner, the senior band leader, leaned against his locker, watching Marcus with narrowed eyes. Zeke had always been the golden boy of the music department, praised for his trumpet skills and charisma. But now, the spotlight that once belonged to him seemed to flicker. As Marcus passed, Zeke smirked. "Nice trick, Johnson. But let's see if you can do it again under real pressure." Marcus paused, unsure how to respond. He didn't crave competition, he only wanted to play. But Zeke's tone made it clear this wasn't admiration. It was a challenge. The next day, the whispers turned into chatter. Word had reached the teachers, and by afternoon, Marcus was called to the principal's office. Robert sat behind his desk, hands clasped tightly, his usual confidence replaced with unease. "I don't know what you pulled yesterday," Roberts began, "but the staff thinks you should perform at the school assembly. I don't have time to argue with them. Do you accept or not?" Marcus's stomach knotted. The assembly wasn't just a classroom, it was the entire school. Hundreds of students, teachers, even parents sometimes came. His fingers tingled with both fear and excitement. "Yes," he said quietly. Roberts gave a curt nod. "Fine, but don't embarrass us." The words stung, but Marcus held his ground. That evening, he practiced in his small bedroom. His mother peeked through the doorway, her eyes full of pride. "Baby," she whispered, "you've got a gift. Don't let anyone make you doubt it." Her words wrapped around him like armor. The night of the assembly arrived quickly. The gymnasium was packed, voices echoing off the high ceilings, banners hanging from the rafters. Marcus waited backstage, his violin case resting on his lap. His hands shook, not from fear this time, but from the weight of the moment. Zeke walked by, his trumpet gleaming under the lights. He smirked again. "Better hope you don't choke out there," he muttered. Marcus closed his eyes. He blocked out the noise, the whispers, the doubts. He thought only of the strings, the bow, the sound that lived inside him. Next, the announcer called. Marcus stepped onto the stage. The crowd's noise dulled, replaced by curious murmurs. Some students smirked, expecting a repeat of the classroom spectacle. Others leaned forward, eager for the music. He raised the violin. The gymnasium hushed. The first note rang out, pure and strong, then another and another. The melody unfolded, filling the massive space, rising higher, brighter, bolder. It was no longer just a performance, it was a declaration. The audience leaned in, captivated. Even the teachers at the back whispered among themselves, eyes wide with astonishment. Then, something unexpected happened. From the corner of his eye, Marcus noticed a figure standing at the entrance of the gym. tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark suit. The man's eyes were locked on him, unblinking, intense. Marcus's bow faltered for just a second, but he pressed on. The music soared. When the last note faded, the silence was deafening. And then, like a tidal wave, the applause crashed over him. Students stood, clapping, cheering, shouting his name. The man in the suit stepped forward. The light caught something clipped to his belt, an official badge. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcus froze. He knew that face. It was his father, and the look in his father's eyes wasn't cold or distant like it had been in the past. It was pride. Pure, undeniable pride. The gymnasium erupted in cheers. But behind the noise, one truth lingered. Marcus's life at Jefferson High had just changed forever, and Principal Roberts was watching from the shadows, his jaw tight, his face pale. The next day, the whole school was buzzing with rumors about what had happened in the auditorium. Some students were still laughing, whispering that the black kid got lucky. Others, who had actually witnessed the performance, couldn't stop talking about the way he played, that it wasn't just good, it was breathtaking. But in the middle of all this noise, Marcus walked through the halls with his head high, violin case in hand, as if nothing could shake him anymore. But things were about to get even more intense. During the first period, the school principal, Mr. Harrison, called Marcus to his office. Everyone thought it was because of the performance. Marcus himself wondered if maybe the principal was going to apologize for humiliating him in front of the school. But when he entered the office, the atmosphere was heavy. Mr. Harrison sat with two other staff members, his face stern. "Marcus," the principal began, "about yesterday. People are talking a lot. And frankly, this school doesn't need unnecessary drama." Marcus clenched his jaw. "Drama? I just played when you told me to." The principal leaned back, narrowing his eyes. "Don't get smart with me. You made a show out of it, and now students are distracted. We run a disciplined school here, not a concert hall." Marcus's heart sank. Instead of praise, instead of recognition, he was being accused. "So, you're saying I shouldn't have played?" he asked, his voice calm but sharp. Mr. Harrison slammed his pen on the desk. "Don't twist my words. You need to understand your place. This school gives you an education, Marcus. That's all you should focus on. Don't think you're some celebrity now." The words stung. "Understand your place." That was the same phrase Marcus had heard too many times in his life. And in that moment, something inside him hardened. But the principal wasn't finished. "You'll not be bringing your violin to school anymore. Do I make myself clear?" Marcus's fists clenched at his side. That violin wasn't just an instrument. It was his voice, his identity, his way out of all the struggles. Taking it away meant silencing him. But before Marcus could respond, a knock came at the office door. It was Miss Carter, the music teacher. She walked in briskly, holding a folder. "Excuse me, but I need to speak about Marcus." The principal looked irritated. "This isn't the time." "No, this is the time," Miss Carter insisted, her voice steady but fiery. She turned to Marcus and then back to the principal. "You humiliated this young man yesterday in front of the entire school. And yet, he turned your so-called joke into a moment of brilliance. Do you have any idea how rare that kind of talent is?" Mr. Harrison's face reddened. "Carter, this isn't your concern." "It is," she cut in sharply. "Because I've already sent Marcus's performance recording to the State Music Association, and guess what? They want him to audition for the state-level youth orchestra. Do you know what that means for him, for this school?" The office fell silent. Marcus's eyes widened. He hadn't even known Miss Carter was recording. The principal's jaw tightened. He realized now that this wasn't just about keeping control anymore. The whole school, and now people outside it, had seen Marcus's gift. If he tried to bury it, it would only make him look worse. Finally, he leaned forward, trying to regain authority. "Fine, but this doesn't change the fact that you need to stay disciplined. Don't let this opportunity distract you." Marcus nodded slowly, but deep down, he knew the principal wasn't supporting him out of belief, only out of fear of looking bad. As Marcus walked out of the office, violin in hand, Miss Carter whispered to him, Don't let anyone silence you. They'll try, but you have something they can't control. Marcus felt a spark ignite in his chest. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving, he was fighting back. And soon the whole world would hear his music, but what Marcus didn't know yet was that not everyone wanted him to succeed. Behind the walls of that school, jealousy was brewing. Some students, and even a few teachers, would do anything to bring him down before his star could rise. And the first move was already being planned. The next morning, the school hall buzzed with whispers even before the bell rang. Everyone had heard what happened the day before, how Jamal stood up to the principal and played the violin with a boldness that nobody expected. For once, the students weren't laughing at him. They were waiting, curious, and maybe even a little inspired. But with curiosity came tension. Because not everyone was happy about Jamal's sudden shine. Principal Walker, sitting in his office, was fuming. He replayed the moment in his head again and again. The boy who was supposed to be embarrassed had instead stolen the spotlight. That wasn't how it was supposed to go. He wanted Jamal silenced, not celebrated. Walker clenched his fists on his desk, thinking, this ends today. He's not going to make a fool out of me in my own school. Meanwhile, Jamal walked through the corridors with his violin case in hand. His heart still pounded from yesterday's performance, but there was a new fire in his chest. For the first time, he felt like maybe he wasn't invisible anymore. The students who once mocked him now looked at him with something close to respect or envy. A few of them even stopped him just to say, "Hey man, that was amazing yesterday." Jamal nodded politely, but deep down he knew this wasn't over. By the afternoon, an announcement echoed through the school intercom. "Attention all students," Principal Walker's stern voice rang out. "There will be a mandatory assembly in the auditorium at 2 p.m. Attendance is not optional." The students groaned, but Jamal felt his stomach twist. He had a bad feeling. The principal wasn't done with him. At exactly 2 p.m., the entire school packed into the auditorium. Walker stood on stage, his expression sharp and cold. "Yesterday," he began, "we witnessed something unusual." He paused, letting his eyes scan the crowd before landing directly on Jamal. "A student decided to use my words as a stage for a performance. And while some of you may think that was entertaining, this is not a circus. This is a place of discipline." The crowd grew silent. Everyone knew who he was talking about. Jamal sat frozen in his seat, trying to stay calm, but his palms were sweating inside his pockets. Then Walker smirked. "So, to prove that yesterday wasn't just some lucky accident, I've decided Jamal will perform for all of you again. Right here, right now." Gasps filled the room. Some students leaned forward eagerly, waiting to see what would happen. Others exchanged worried glances. Jamal felt every pair of eyes burning into him. His chest tightened, but then he remembered his mother's words the night before. "Your gift isn't a joke. Don't ever let them treat it like one. Show them who you are." Slowly, Jamal stood up. He walked toward the stage, each step echoing through the silent hall. When he reached the center, Principal Walker handed him the microphone with a mocking grin. "Let's see if you can handle the spotlight twice," Walker sneered. Jamal took a deep breath, set the microphone aside, and opened his violin case. His hands trembled for a moment, but as soon as he drew the bow across the strings, the first note silenced every whisper in the room. This time he didn't just play a song. He poured his entire heart into it, every insult, every laugh, every moment he had been made to feel small. The notes soared, filling the auditorium with a raw, emotional power that no one expected. Students leaned forward, jaws dropping. Teachers who had doubted him sat frozen, unable to look away. When Jamal finished, there was no silence this time. The entire room erupted in applause. Some students even stood up, cheering and clapping. It wasn't just appreciation, it was respect. But while the crowd roared, Principal Walker's face turned red. He gripped the edge of the podium so tightly his knuckles turned white. He hadn't expected Jamal to win over the entire school. For the first time, the principal looked like the one who was losing control, and as Jamal stepped off the stage, walking past the students who now looked at him with admiration, One thought echoed in everyone's mind. This was just the beginning. Would the principal let this go? Or would he try something even worse to put Jamal back in his place? The answer was written on Walker's furious face. This battle was far from over. The entire auditorium was holding its breath. No one moved, no one whispered. The boy's violin filled the air with a sound so pure, so emotional, it was as if every corner of the hall had been painted with music. His fingers moved across the strings with confidence, his bow gliding like it was telling a story of its own. Students who once laughed at him were now staring with wide eyes, unable to believe what they were hearing. Teachers leaned forward in their seats, stunned. Even the janitor, who had paused with his broom by the door, stood still, his mouth slightly open, but the most shocked of all was the principal. He had only meant to humiliate the boy, to make him a joke in front of everyone. Now, instead of laughter, the boy had the entire school mesmerized. The principal's face flushed red as he realized his joke had turned into the most powerful performance the school had ever seen. Suddenly, something even more unexpected happened. A guest who had been quietly sitting in the front row stood up. Nobody had noticed her before, but now all eyes turned toward her. She was a well-known music director from a prestigious academy, someone the school had invited to judge the annual talent showcase, but no one expected her to be here today. With tears in her eyes, she clapped loudly, breaking the silence. "This," she said in a clear voice, "is the kind of talent the world needs to see?" Gasps echoed across the room. The students erupted into applause, cheering for the boy they once mocked. Many stood up, giving him a standing ovation. The boy, still holding his violin, lowered his head humbly, his heart racing with disbelief. The principal, however, felt sweat dripping down his neck. This wasn't supposed to happen. His plan to embarrass the boy had backfired in the worst possible way. And deep inside, he knew his reputation at the school might never recover. But for the boy, this was only the beginning. The school hall had never been this silent. The performance was over, but the echo of Darius's violin still lingered in the air. The students sat frozen, unable to clap, unable to breathe, as though time itself had stopped. The principal stood stiff, his smile cracked, his face drained of color. He had expected embarrassment, laughter, and a lesson to put Darius back in his place. Instead, he had witnessed something extraordinary, something that made him feel smaller than ever. Then it happened. The silence broke with a single clap. It came from the back of the hall, from a teacher who had always supported Darius quietly but never dared to speak against the principal. That one clap multiplied, another joined, then another, and suddenly the hall erupted. Students stood on their feet, clapping, cheering, shouting Darius's name as if he were a star. The sound shook the walls. Darius looked out at the sea of faces, tears burning in his eyes. For the first time in his life, he wasn't invisible, he wasn't mocked. He wasn't just the quiet black kid with the violin. He was respected, no, celebrated, but not everyone clapped. The principal's jaw tightened. His hands gripped the podium so hard that his knuckles turned white. He forced a smile, but his eyes gave him away, cold, furious, humiliated. He leaned toward the microphone, trying to regain control. All right, settle down," he said, but his voice cracked. Nobody listened. Darius lowered his violin slowly, his heart pounding. He knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning of something bigger, something dangerous. Because the more he shined, the more the principal would try to crush him. And then, just as the applause began to fade, the auditorium doors opened. A woman walked in, dressed in a sharp suit, her presence commanding immediate attention. She was a stranger to most of the students, but the principal's face went pale as soon as he saw her. The woman stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Darius, and introduced herself. "I'm from the State Board of Education. I came here today because I've been hearing some concerning reports about how students are being treated in this school." The room fell into a new kind of silence, thick, uneasy. The students exchanged glances, teachers shifted nervously. The principal swallowed hard, sweat forming on his forehead. She turned toward Darius and asked gently, "Would you be willing to share your story?" Every eye in the hall turned to him. This was his moment not just to defend himself, but to expose everything. The unfair treatment, the humiliation, the attempts to silence him. He could finally make them see the truth, but as Darius opened his mouth to speak, the principal cut in quickly. "This is completely unnecessary. He's exaggerating." Let him speak," the woman interrupted firmly, her voice sharp. Enough to slice through the tension. Darius looked at the principal, then at his classmates who were silently urging him on with their eyes. He took a deep breath. His hands still trembled, but his voice, when it finally came, was strong, and with that, the real story began to unravel. The truth was about to shake, not just the hall, but the entire school to its core. The courtroom had never felt this heavy. Every pair of eyes was locked on Raymond, the man who once stood tall with arrogance, now trembling under the crushing weight of truth. His voice cracked as he tried to defend himself, but the evidence against him was undeniable. Documents, recordings, and testimonies all stacked against his lies. A hush fell when the judge leaned forward. "Mr. Raymond, everything you built was based on deception. Today, that ends." Gasps echoed across the room. Raymond's head dropped. The man who mocked others, who humiliated without a second thought, was now exposed in front of the very people he once belittled. On the other side, Maya stood tall. Calm, steady, her strength wasn't in her words, it was in her silence, in the dignity she carried from the very beginning. She didn't need revenge. The truth had already spoken louder than anything else. Reporters rushed outside the courthouse, cameras flashing. Headlines would soon spread like wildfire. CEO exposed in court scandal. Raymond's empire crumbled. That very day, investors pulled out, employees walked away, and the board declared him unfit to lead. The mighty had fallen, but Maya didn't celebrate his downfall. She simply walked out, head high, knowing that justice had been served not through anger, but through patience, resilience, and truth. Her quiet victory wasn't just hers. It was for every person who had been silenced, mocked, or underestimated. As she stepped outside into the sunlight, people clapped. Not because she destroyed a man, but because she proved that dignity always outshines arrogance. Moral of the story: no matter how loud lies may be, the truth will always find its voice. Arrogance may rise fast, but dignity lasts longer. Never underestimate someone's silence. It often carries more power than words.